and that's my issue. I think it is possible. I think we need to think about it. And I'm gonna also be frank, as someone who's in academia, and both of you know this. People will run off with your ideas in a minute. So that's the other problem. You're assuming the person is being creative and it's their idea when in fact they could have got it from somebody else, right? That's the whole reason we have a copyright office, is that you got to validate that you have in fact produced this. Now with AI, you can give me all your ideas, I can roll out and be like, I am now the professional expert on this, and bump these two, pay me $2,000 to talk to you.
So let's follow up on that in a couple of directions, right? Because first of all, these data sets and these language models and these image banks and everything that these AI tools are trained on represent straight up theft. Imagine if you're a photographer and you've got 30, 40 years in your craft, and all of your images are used in some package that somebody else is, pulling from to create whatever they created, right? And then, so there's so many things that we can dive into, but one, so there's the theft, there's the fact that so many of these tools have been released for public use to make the public do the work on training the models, where these tools are nowhere near ready for prime time. And so these corporations have shifted a lot of the labor of developing their products onto a public that's getting no recognition or participation in that, right? So there are a wide range of problems, including specific harms that result. But I want to, as we set that up for later, I want to put those comments with a few other things. But right now I want to focus still on the creativity part, right? Even with the cautions you've entered, even with your optimism, which I think is exactly the right space for us to be in, think for a minute, for all of you here with us, if you want to time travel, let's say back, because we're talking about a literary scholar and a historian here, to some period in some place in black history, black culture that you just want to visit for a weekend. And we're going to create the Star Trek holodeck to take us back there. So I might want to go to 105 in Euclid in the 60s where Winston Willis won all that money in that dice game, supposedly, that allowed him to get those buildings. Or I might want to visit a Harlem Renaissance rent party, right?
Not a rent party.
Yes, absolutely. With some cards and some brown liquor and all of that. So, and imagine you're going to use some tool to create the immersive experience for that moment that you want to visit. Again, for those of you who've seen any kind of Star Trek, just like walking into the house suite. Right. My question for you two is, if that's the assignment we're giving this group, and if that's the assignment we're giving students in a hypothetical class, how are you going to assess where you see individual creativity from the student, even with all we know about these tools and systems?
Well, I think once again that depends on the assignment. So you could assign them to be creative within that space and create maybe art that was generated like others that created art within that space, or music within that space, or even maybe some movies within that space, Oscar Micheaux, for instance. However, you could also assess their creativity with regards to how well they may train another non-player character or another AI within that particular space, so another avatar. So let's say they wanted to train it on our friend Marcus Garvey, and how well someone is able to incorporate speeches and information and writings and biographies, autobiographies about Marcus Garvey, how well that's done, and how well then that particular that bot is able to respond to queries that people make of it. And you can do that's just another part of AI that we haven't even talked about, and that's regards to generative AI with regards to text and how you train a model and all the information that you give that model so that it can answer questions appropriately based on its training. So that aspect of creativity, how well you want it to perform, could be part of that creativity. That say someone knows how to import PDFs on particular writings or something like that. So when I think about creativity, it's not just the artistic output. It's not just the output with regards to writing or something like that. It's maybe how something responds within an environment that's been trained specifically to respond in a particular way.
Let me just underscore something there before we pass the mic. So one thing I hear you saying is the depth of the work that student would do in making sure that the corpus, that the tool, the body of texts and images and sources, so that they've really done their work in searching that out and brought a particular perspective to how they're selecting the materials they want to populate that corpus.
Creativity.
Boom. All right, go ahead, Doc.
Actually, I was going to jump right off from there. Well, first, let me do a little backtracking, because the reference we're making to Marcus Garvey actually has a background to it that we should explain.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to cast blame. This guy right here has been doing a lot of work around digital humanities for quite a while. And a lot of his work has been on Harlem in the 1920s. And his work has gone from many iterations, right? Virtual reality, Second Life was the first iteration.
Absolutely.
Virtual reality, things like that. And his newest project is to construct a world in which you would be able to converse with Marcus Garvey. And so Dr. Carter has asked myself and a number of colleagues to join him in crafting, right, this world where you can have an interactive exchange with Marcus Garvey. And a good portion of what we've sort of talking about in terms of ethics is sort of figuring out how to move around that. And this is where I absolutely agree. The creativity is in the process.
All right.
It's in the thinking through and the materials that you decide to utilize, what you decide to keep out. But you also have to be very clear about why you've included some things and not the others, right?
Yes.
And so it's a holistic process of picking and choosing and analysis, and you are creating. It is at that point you are creating a baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you are cooking a meal. And just
or making a quilt.
Yeah, or making a quilt,
Okay,
right?
quilt.
When you start to put the process in, that's where the creativity comes up. When you choose your thread, when you choose your material, all these things are the making of the creativity, right? The outcome is then this beautiful piece that we have seen. But the process cannot be make the machine do it. That is not a demonstration of human creativity. Right, so that's why I push back on this idea that you can just be creative with the machine. You have to do work, and I hate to be Trekkie again, but when you look at Star Trek, the bottom line is that they are still doing the work. The technology does not determine what they do; they determine what the technology will do, and we need to be very clear on that.
Yeah.
No, don't because I'm not there.
I'm just here to set y'all up, so.
I know. But the other thing I would say about creativity is how you think, not just about the process, but the collective exchange in the building, right? So there's the process of putting in material, but then there's the process of engaging with a collective, and that interaction is also a creative process, right? This is where you have a group of people working together, and in that exchange is this mix, this collaboration that then also produces. So creativity is not just the process and procedures, but also the interaction.
So what I hear you saying is we got to bring call and response with the humans to the process, right?
Correct.
So we want to, like, that's some bars right there. We want to put a pin in that. Now, the other thing I heard you say, though, is that because that process is where the life is, where the creativity is, we have to be willing to be transparent about everything that we did in that process.
Correct.
Now, what's fascinating about that is the creators, the companies that launch these tools and systems are doing the exact opposite of that. There is no transparency about how they build their data sets. There is no transparency about how they build their algorithms to set up the predictive model of when you ask for this, This is how we're going to get you a hand that actually has 5 fingers instead of 7. Because that's still one of the visual challenges, right? There's no transparency. Another concept that we talk about within AI is data sovereignty, the ability for people to make decisions about how they want their data and their input to be used or what they're willing to give consent to. How do we square the circle of, when it comes to the values we have for human interaction with these systems, transparency is key and process is key, but the humans who are part of the companies that launched these tools have no expectation of transparency, and they often fully resist that.